Greetings, upstanders. Dr. O here, and I've been seeing so many stories over the last few years, maybe primarily since the pandemic, about the epidemic of loneliness, and which is real, which is a real challenge. And out of it, I've seen a lot of programs, and, people within the federal government, people like Maryland Governor, Wes Moore, like other people, coming up with these programs to deal with men, right? To deal with the challenge of men and loneliness, and men and isolation, and men and inability to feel integrated into society, and all of these different things. And then I watch the news and I hear stories about people like say things like, well, people need to make sure that when we're dealing with men that were more sensitive, and then, with the MAGA men, as well, not to isolate them, not to make them feel uncomfortable, and all of this stuff. And I'll be very honest, I have a lot of conflicting feelings about all of this. Well, not conflicting feelings about some of this. To be clear, first of all, let's go to this whole thing about dealing with MAGA and Republicans and so on and so forth. And people are saying, well, if you really want to get them in, you got to make sure you can't use racist, and you can't call them this or that. And I'm like, yo, these guys spend all of their time calling us everything but a child of God. And if somebody commits a racist act, all of a sudden we can't say that they're racist. Like, part of, as Jay-Z said, you can't hear what you don't reveal. I mean, part of coming together is people being honest about actions. When you go into programs, 12-step programs, things like Alcoholics Anonymous or various types of things, one of the things you have to do in the beginning is admit what you are. And this idea that people have to go, and again, this is not about the men thing. I'm coming to the men thing in a second. This idea that people have to treat Republicans or particularly like MAGA voters with kid gloves, now I get not saying things like, yeah, y'all effed around and found out, or I told you so, on the economy and stuff like that. I get that, because everybody's suffering at the same time. And people on both sides of the aisle have regretted their votes for their party members, for Democrats or Republicans and so on and so forth. So it's not it's not like condemning people for regretting it, but it's like, what are you going to do about it now? Okay, yeah, Trump is taking the economy. You said you voted for him on the economy. Now what you going to do? And it's not the Democrats' job to make Republicans see that, who are voting for Trump, that they messed up. It's their job. It's those Republicans' job to see that I messed up. I voted for this guy who was a liar and gave me all of the cultural war stuff that I wanted, and now I'm in the tank. I got to do something about it. That's on them. But those same folks, if they're saying something that's racist or Islamophobic or anti-Semitic or whatever, they got this far by saying that stuff and getting away with it. It needs to be called out, and it needs to be challenged. So this whole kid gloves things on Republican voters who might be like struggling because of, they're not getting what they expected from Trump. I think a lot of them are getting what they expected from Trump. They just didn't think it was going to hit them. And this isn't about whether I have sympathy for them or not. It's not about that. It's about the time being right to always do right. And so this idea that I'm not going to call somebody who says something racist that they have a racist idea or racist thought or sexist thought or whatever, this coddling is how we got where we are. Now let's take it back directly to the conversation about men, because this isn't Republican, Democrat, or whatever. What has frustrated me about this conversation about men is, like, where were all of these programs and thoughts for young girls, for young women? I'm raising 3 children. My wife and I, well, one's an adult now. My daughters are, 19 and 16, and my son is 10. And, raising my daughters, I didn't see these programs. I did see, good programs to get more women, young girls involved in STEM programs and things like that, which I've appreciated. But this idea of, like, the epidemic of, helping, women feel integrated into society and all of this other type of stuff because they're being left behind. Women have always been left behind in this country. Look at the wage gap. Look at all of these different types of things. And because, women might be, more women may be represented in universities and places like that, it's like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden it's a crisis of manhood. And so, and then, so that's like my initial thoughts. Like, how are we just disrespecting women like that by just saying we got to coddle to men? And then, to be quite honest, I feel like many of these programs targeting men are actually targeting white men. I don't feel like a lot of these programs are super inclusive as it relates to non-white men. People are talking all of this stuff, the manosphere, the blogger bros or whatever they call these guys, and the Joe Rogans, and you got to get these guys who live. And there are other not men who aren't white who are dealing with these issues as well, and I don't feel like they get paid attention to. But now, at the same time, there's another word that comes to mind when I think about this crisis of men, and that word is violence. The fact of the matter is that girls who experience various things of loneliness and the like are more likely to harm themselves. More likely to harm themselves, which is tragic within its own right. Don't get it twisted in terms of me saying it's not serious. Men, on the other hand, are more likely to harm others. They are more likely to shoot up schools, more likely to shoot up synagogues and mosques and grocery stores and post offices and churches and everything, and have more access to these weapons of war. And this is obviously an issue that will affect anybody, male, female, non-binary, binary, like whatever it is, it's going to affect all of us. And so I do believe that we do need to be doing work to deal with this crisis of loneliness. We do need to do work to make sure that men are not feeling isolated from society as it's moving on and becoming more equal, because the responses from men, domestic abuse and so on and so forth, obviously that can happen from any gender, but it's mostly men. Those things can have real consequences in our communities. And I think some of the stuff needs to go along with also things like gun control and all of that other type of stuff. But I feel like some of these programs are happening at the expense of women. And I personally believe that if we cared enough about girls, we wouldn't have to have programs that specifically and outright target men. We're doing this for men. This whole society has been built for men, particularly white men, has been built for them. And when I hear people, like the Chris Matthews, the Scott Galloways, saying, don't blame the men for the things that men of my generation created. Don't blame the men now. Like, it's like, come on. When do the men, for lack of a better term, man up, right? It's and again, I'm saying this as somebody who, my wife and I, we're raising a 10-year-old and 10-year-old boy. And I do have concerns about loneliness and isolation and things that he might feel. And, we're doing, our part and doing the best that we can as most parents do. And so again, I'm mindful of it. But I just believe that we can put the same effort into helping men stay integrated in society or become more integrated. We can do that same effort with women and young and girls. We could be doing that too, and we shouldn't leave them behind. And yes, I'm on a college campus. When I'm talking to women who come into my office, and some will talk about, I hear them talking like in the cafeterias or in class before class starts. I hear the things that they say about, like, they're not like quality men out there, and there's not, I don't know who who I'm gonna be a partner with if I choose to date. Like I've heard, and even speaking in high schools, I hear young girls say these things as well. And I keep going back between saying girls and young girls, but girls are young. So it's just like, y'all just forgive me. I get when I start like just talking. But when I hear these like, girls in high school talk about, well, yeah, I see this and I see that. There's definitely conversations that are out there as it relates to women not being able to feel like they are finding men who are up to snuff. I'm not a relationship expert. I'm just saying I hear those conversations. And I think that's a problem as well. So what do you all think? What do you all think? Do you think it's wrong to have these programs that are specifically targeted towards men? Do you feel like it's leaving out the women who've always been left out in many ways, shapes, and forms, and have had to figure it out on their own? Is it hypocritical? Is it wrong? What are your thoughts about what I said about the real threats of violence from men who may feel like they're isolated and being left behind by society? Is it on them to figure out how to integrate, or is it on the leaders in society to figure out how to integrate them in these programs, the schools, and the like? I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Holler back at your boy. And don't forget, subscribe for all the latest videos and to never miss a beat here on my channel. I appreciate all the support. Let me know what you think. Peace.